And so this is a group some of you may have met last year. We are very, very privileged to have back a group from GRIP. They're going to introduce themselves. And with that, it is my great pleasure to turn it over to Kim. Are you starting us off? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laura, and everybody from the Eradicate Hate Conference for inviting us back here. We're so happy to be here. My name is Kim Grose Moore, and I'm the Executive Director of the GRIP Training Institute that runs the Guiding Rage into Power program. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction of the GRIP program, and then we have a video that we'll share you, bringing you into a prison in California. And then I'm here with my 3 colleagues who do the work and have been through the program or participate in it, and we'll be able to share some stories and have some conversation. So the GRIP program is an evidence-based methodology that has been developed over 25 years of working with incarcerated people, thousands of incarcerated people, and many survivors of violence. It's based on the principles of restorative justice and represents an alternative to an alternative way of addressing crime and violence. It takes people who are predominantly serving sentences of life with the possibility of parole for having committed serious violent crimes, takes them on a year-long intensive journey of trauma, healing, and accountability, and that transforms violent behavior into an attitude of emotional intelligence, and that then prevents re-victimization. So in the 10 years between 2012 and 2022, almost 1,300 students have graduated from the GRIP program, and 674 have been released and come home to their communities. And the recidivism rate in those 10 years is less than 1%. We actually think that that's kind of a low bar, because recidivism is just, well, you haven't committed another crime or been caught for it. But we actually believe that through this program, you become a peacemaker. And so the 674 graduates who have come home, they are healthy, responsible people who are serving their communities in a whole variety of ways and making a living amends for the harm that they caused. So we're here offering to take you into this program as an example of a solution to violence and a way to repair harm. Because we don't really think about eradicating hate, we're really much more about transforming hate. And kind of to pick up on what I think it was Emily, the sister of Andrew this morning, talked about, that we really need to move out of the us-them paradigm if we're going to really make major change. So with that, I'd like to have the video show.
SQ, we be gripping, that's what this click do. Sitting in the fire like we're getting BBQ. All colors intertwined like a Rubik's Cube, yeah. We gotta stop the violence. GRIP is the acronym, cause we've been guiding. Rage and a power, power and a peace, so that we can leave prison before we get released, yeah. Cause hurt people, but heal people, yeah. I had a dream I could buy my way to freedom and free people, yeah.
It's like recently, like I explained, shared with some of y'all, my brother was murdered November 17th this year, last year, I mean, and today is his birthday. Normally, if somebody get hit on our side, we go retaliate and go do something on their side. Now, this is the time when you just sitting here and I'm doing it in a healthy way. I'm sitting in here and I'm going through the anger. I'm going through the hurt. I'm going through the good times, laughing about the good memories that I had of him. And I'm not just stuck in that one gear. And if it wasn't for this group, I don't think that I would be able to sit back and respond healthily like this. And that's that emotional intelligence. That's being able to track exactly what I'm feeling. That's learning how to sit in that fire and not just go react to something every time you get hurt. To me, that's, like I say, it's big.
I've been spinning on the wheel of cause and effect, searching for original pain. I'm feeling shame and regrets when it surfaces. Wonder what the purpose is. I would never know how many people have been hurt from this. Crime that I committed out of anger. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, thinking how I could have handled the situation better. I see plenty in the rearview mirror. Hindsight 2020.
I feel that the change that I'm making is genuine. I mean, I want to change way back then, but I really didn't know how. I was still lying about my committed offense. I was saying that I was confronted in a liquor store by a gang member. I went outside the liquor store. He followed me outside the liquor store and pulled a weapon out. You know, a struggle ensued for possession of the weapon, and I shot him. You know, that was my legal defense. You know, so I've been living that life for years now. And you know, but when I got here and I started participating in some of the groups, you know, I started to realize what accountability was about. And then I would be seeing guys, you know, holding their truth, people like Robin, you know, and Kyrie and Troy. I would see these guys, and so they inspired me. They let me know, okay, if these guys can change, then I know that I can change. You know, in terms of being open and honest, you know, about the things I've done.
God bless you, bro. Hey, stay strong, bro. You got that. Your change is evident, bro.
Right on.
You're a stronger man than me, bro.
That's right. Stand in the truth, man. Stand in the truth.
Without a doubt. Thank you.
All right.
We're coming in here because we get to remind each other, welcome each other back in who we really are, because when we committed a crime, we forgot. We forgot who we really are. And so you cannot forget that again.
On December 7th, 1994, I murdered a woman named Christy Anderson. She is the mother of my now 20-year-old daughter. And on Thanksgiving, I saw my daughter for the first time in 19 years since I've been in prison. For me, one of my biggest problems was my anger and violent and aggressive outbursts. My mother sent me to live with my father when I was 9, and my father used to beat me like I was a grown man. And I think without a program like GRIP, I wouldn't have been able to receive a visit and be open to everything that my daughter Katie had to say to me on Thanksgiving. The fact that someone who I felt I harmed the most in this world could tell me that they forgive me for what I did.
If one of you is working, you're all doing your work, because we all have skeletons in the closet. We all have hurt people. And it's coming clean with that. That is a big part of reclaiming who we truly are.
So in closing, I want to honor the earth, the air, the water, the fire. And I want to say a prayer for our ancestors. And all of you here today, and the work that you're doing, and how it will resonate, not only here in San Quentin in this community, but throughout the world.
So, Troy, could you enlighten us as to what's different here?
I'm still breathing. No. Last week I went to the board and was found suitable for release. Yeah.
So I've probably seen that video 300 times, and I think I get choked up every single time because I know the intensity of what it feels like in a circle like that in a prison, and I see a lot of familiar faces in that video as well. More than half of the men from that tribe are now out, and they are running their own nonprofits, and they are contributing to their communities, and they're on the GRIP staff going back into the prisons and really making a living amends. So wanted to bring that into the room. That video was San Quentin prison. We are now in 7 prisons, including a women's prison in the state of California, and we serve about 500 students each year. And just on a personal note, I do this work because it's healing for me as well. It's a mutual process that we are in, those of us who come from the outside to go into the prisons and those doing the work on the inside. I experienced sexual harm as a young person, and it is healing for me to go and sit in a circle with men who have committed serious crimes, serious harm against women and children is often the case in the prison that I go to. And we do this work together. I also, my elders fled genocide from Russia and Eastern Europe and Hitler on one side of my family, and the other side of my family can trace our lineage back to the Mayflower. So we also know that, I know that part of my history are folks who perpetrated and benefited from genocide and slavery. And so the work, there's a connection here. The work that we do of healing and accountability and living amends, it's a collective, mutual process that can be transformative. So with that, I want to invite my friends and colleagues to share a little bit about their stories and why they're here, starting with you, Tommy.
Thank you, Kim. My name is Tommy Winfrey. Thinking about how am I going to introduce myself here today? What's the context? Why am I on this stage? I think I have to take it back to when I was born. I was born in Southeast Texas in the late 70s and was raised there till I was about 8 or 9 years old. It was a very segregated community, and we moved to LA when I was about 8 or 9. But during that time, now I really look back and reflect on my life, I was always taking in these messages, right? Like this is the way the world was. It was helping to shape my worldview and contribute to that. Moving to LA was a different experience. I was this little country boy placed in a big city, and it was a melting pot, and I soon found myself face first with diversity. And during that time, I struggled with an alcoholic father and mother. This sounds familiar. I just heard someone else saying something very similar. Struggled with an alcoholic father and a mother who supported a family of 4 boys and him, and left to my own devices in the streets. And soon enough, I started to numb myself by the age of 12 using drugs, and fell deeper and deeper into that. And at the age of 19, I murdered a man named Shay Sibbett, and found myself soon after incarcerated with a life sentence. As soon as I was placed in prison, the first question they asked me when I walked in the gates of that prison was, "What race are you?" I said white. I was immediately shepherded into a holding tank, and from that point on, that became my identity in prison. Prisons in California were segregated extremely during that time, and I was left to the devices of all the other white inmates to educate me on the ways that I was supposed to behave and survive in that prison. And I began to be indoctrinated in a lot of hate rhetoric, and I blindly accepted that for a long time. I accepted that that was the way the world was around me. I was used to violence. That's what I saw growing up, and that's what I continue to see in prison. There wasn't a day that went by in my first decade of incarceration I didn't think about, as soon as I walked out of that cell door, someone might stab me just because of the color of my skin and for something I had no part in, but some other white guy did something to offend somebody or vice versa. And it was very much that them versus us mentality. And I blindly accepted that. But back in 2010, I was sent to San Quentin State Prison, and what a different world it was. I began on my path of higher education, and I was also involved in a lot of the prison programming there. And I started to see that there was this whole community. There's like 3,000 volunteers that come into this prison on an annual basis. I was suspicious of them in the beginning. I started to question why they were there. What were they getting out of it? What was their motive? But soon, when I let my guard down, I began to see they saw me for who I was and not the acts I committed. And it allowed me, with higher education, to start thinking critically about my life, my belief systems, where they came from, and ultimately realizing that I had just blindly accepted other people's values that they had instilled in me and not really thought about what I truly believed. And through programs like GRIP, I began to really think about my life and connect with my, they call it your inner child, kind of really rediscover who and what happened to this 5-year boy that, just loved to hold his puppy dog or, be out in the grass running around and didn't have a care in the world. What happened to him? How did I become such a callous individual that I could ultimately take someone's life? And, that was really when I started to change my life through programs like GRIP.
Thank you, Tommy.
Yes. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Fateen Jackson, and I am a senior facilitator and facilitator training coordinator with the GRIP program. I go inside state prisons in California and offer and deliver the GRIP program to the inmate students in there, people incarcerated students in there. And I want to just start off by saying I didn't start off as an outside facilitator. I was formerly incarcerated myself. I served over 21 years in the California state prison system for violent crime. And through the work of GRIP during my incarceration, I was able to earn an early release through a commentation through former Governor Jerry Brown of California in 2018. But before I actually got to the place of learning about myself through GRIP, in my early stages in life, I was my mom's only son. I had 4 sisters at the time, and I did not have a father in the house. Like Tommy, I was left to my own devices to learn about my own boyhood, which there was a lot of low self-esteem, a lot of feelings of low value because of poverty and drug and alcohol addiction happening in my family structure. And so I gravitated towards life of crime through the gang culture. And I went through every level of incarceration, juvenile hall, county camps, juvenile prison, up till my actual very serious offense of attacking a man from my anger. And so during that time, before I ended up committing that crime, I was filled with a lot of rage, and it was built up from a lot of past traumas. When I was 16 years old, being released from a juvenile hall, I really wanted to kind of turn my life around. I knew that I was going in the wrong direction. I just didn't know how. I was encouraged by my mother as well as my probation officer at the time to go to this job fair that was being held in the city of Long Beach, where I grew up. And they were offering summer jobs to teens. And I didn't have no interview experience. I was super nervous, but I was encouraged to go, so I went. And upon my first interview, there was a middle-aged white guy that was the interviewee. He was looking at my application. I had put down that I was arrested for several minor crimes at the time, and I did have a serious crime on there, but was willing to explain. He asked me why I was there. I told him I was there to get a job, and he said, "No, why are you really here?" And I was pretty stumped by that question because I told him I was trying to get a job, right? That's all I knew how to interview. I just want a job. That's all I could say. So he said, no. He said, "Are you here to rob the place? We don't hire people like you." And so I was just stumped and stunned. I didn't have no answer. And he pretty much dismissed me, and I left out just silent and so discouraged that I just left. I didn't even go through the other rounds of interviews and just told my mother that they hired someone else. From that point on, I had a disdain for society as a whole and felt that I didn't belong to legitimate society. And I guess that a lot of my life was to live in, low income area and to have to survive how best I could. And through that, I went, down the rabbit hole of just personal turmoil that led to me committing the crime of robbery and attempted murder, where I served the 21 years. So while inside, and I discovered GRIP while inside 12, 14 years in, I believe, and it helped me really understand what happened to me, what was my issues, the trauma of abandonment from my father, starting there, poverty, of course, drug addiction and abuse in my family, being bullied at times, peer pressure. All these things had a role in my development. And so I had to learn how to sit in the fire with that and see that I can become a better person. I can evolve into a decent human being. And that was that one person's opinion of me, not the whole world's opinion of me. So from that point on, I wanted to be of service once I got the healing that I really needed. And so I was able to become a facilitator for GRIP while inside. And I actually facilitated Tommy, where in prison, he's correct, in prison there are, a racial dynamic there that separates and segregates us. But once we get to a place where that separation and segregation is no longer an issue, which is like lower security prisons, we're able to program together and get to learn from each other. And what I learned is that most of us have a lot in common, regardless of our race, our background, our culture, our religion, any of that. A lot of us had abandonment issues. A lot of us had A lot of us had abuse. A lot of us, were neglected. And we met in the middle of pain, right? Pain and our anger. That's where our common ground was at. And so through that, we were able to learn from each other on how to heal from that. And so we do service everyone, from street gang members, Crips and Bloods, to, prison, white supremacist gangs, and Hispanic gangs, Asian American gangs. And so we are able to transform their lives through this work, regardless of what their background is. So I am honored to be here to just share the stories of these students and to show that transformation is possible, and as long as they're ready.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trino?
Yes, my name is Trino Jimenez, and I am a crime survivor. It was 37 years ago, February of 1986, that my oldest brother walked out of our home and he never returned. My brother was robbed and he was brutally beat to death. As the time went on, I discovered more that the person responsible took a bumper jack and he beat my brother over the head a total of 17 times and left the scene of the crime and then returned back and he slit my brother's throat. When that had happened, I was completely devastated by this event. I was able to see my brother. The mortician had said that the casket had to be closed, and I was given an invitation to see my brother. I was not motivated to see the injuries that was done. I was motivated to really help process what was before me. And I just remember seeing a huge gash on his forehead. The mortician tried his best to cover as much as possible. And this event just left me and my family devastated. And as the years went on, I had a lot of struggles, but it was my faith, my Christian faith, that at that time I believe was a driver in my life, that I reached out to the person 29 years later. In 2015, I reached out to the person responsible, and I wrote a letter to him. And it was through the letter exchange, through victim services and programs that are offered there in California, helped me to really look into who this person was. And like I said, it was my Christian faith that I thought was the driver, and my initial letter to him was that I wanted him to know that God loved him. And number two is I wanted him to be free of any guilt or shame that he has carried for his actions. And the third message that I was conveying to him was that I forgive him for what he's done. And to my surprise, he engaged back. He wrote to me. The last image that I had of this individual was that he was an angry, cold, callous person who had no regard to human life. And by this engagement, it started a process. It was him that introduced me to programs such as GRIP, the restorative justice, and it was there in March of 2017, after almost 2 years of letter exchange, I walked into a prison and I participated in a restorative justice program called Victim Offender Dialogue. And what we were able to do is come together and have a conversation, him and I. And then from there, as the time went on, I was able to participate in his parole hearing in 2018. I attended the hearing. I gave my victim impact statement. And then he was denied parole that year, and then he got a 3-year denial. The following year, he was able to advance. In December of 2019, I once again attended his parole hearing. And in May of 2020, he was able to come home. He spent a total of 34 years being held accountable for the life of my brother. And today, because of these programs and because of restorative justice, I have found myself experiencing healing. It's been a tremendous healing journey. I'm going to say that for me and my family, we never talked about my brother. And today I'm able to talk about my brother. Today I'm able to honor his memory. He was the oldest of my family. He had 2 sons. He was married. His name was Julio Jimenez. And he was a significant person in my life. And today, I'm able to talk about my brother. I'm able to keep his memory alive. And I realized one thing, that as a family, we never talked about our brother because it was too painful of a subject to talk about. Kim.
Thank you, Trino. Trino, can I ask a little bit more? I'm curious if you can share a little bit more after your brother Julio was so brutally murdered. What's your memory of that period right after the couple years after if there was a trial, kind of what your image of the person who took his life, his name was Melvin, is that right? What was your image of him, and how did you cope in those early times? And then what led you to reach out to him eventually?
So in 1986, 1987, I'm not even sure when the trial actually took place. My memory is there's a lot of blackout. There's a lot of things that I just don't remember. Yet I knew that I was there. I had this memory of seeing him as a person who was very cold, very angry, and a lot of things I didn't understand. My reaction to the injury that was inflicted upon me emotionally was that I was very angry. I actually felt very broken. I was devastated. I wanted to hold an entire race responsible for the actions of one individual. That's how damaged I was, and I just remember feeling very conflicted with a lot of emotions that I had, yet I didn't know how to process these emotions. It was a very challenging time in my life. I definitely didn't want to live in hatred, and yet that was an emotion that I feel my anger could lead me to. Revenge, rage, and I definitely didn't want to live in bitterness. So I had a lot of struggles. And I mentioned that my faith was a driver that I thought, but also there was another driver that I had of reaching out to Melvin. And I reached out to him because I wanted to know why he acted this way. Why did he do his crime so violently? And he was the only person that had the answers to my questions. And then I was able to convey to him a lot of struggles that were upon my life.
Yeah. So I want to ask Tommy and Fateen a little bit more about what your journey was, and Fateen now as you're facilitating others. Can you describe a little bit more about what helped you to heal and become accountable? Like what really is part of a program like GRIP or others that you took that really helped you be able to become accountable, heal your own pain?
Yes, absolutely. What helped me heal, would get to a place of healing, was self-forgiveness, which was really, really hard to do. Maybe 15 years into my sentence, my children were only teenagers. Well, actually, let me take that back. They were actually 12. They were 12 years old, and I was like 10 years into my sentence, 11, somewhere around there. And they wrote me a letter saying how disappointed they were in me being incarcerated, how much I missed. First day of school, daughter, father dance, and my son was playing basketball, missing games, things like that. And that really broke me. It really broke me, just hearing them, just reading it. And at the end, they both said they forgave me and that they was gonna wait for me. At that time, my sentence was 36 years, and I was term to do 31 years. So my children would have been 32 years old, and I left them when they were 1. They're twins. And I ended up getting out when they were 22. So that helped me get to a place of forgiving my father, who I blamed everything on. He wasn't around to show me this, that's why I'm doing that. You know, nobody taught me this, that's why I'm doing this. And I had to realize, like, you know, he had traumas too. He had traumas too as to why he couldn't be around. And I had to have some empathy for that and hold myself accountable for my own actions and grow from it.
For me, I had a lot of anger, and I continued to have a lot of anger when I was incarcerated. It took me a long time, and I'm embarrassed to say, to be truly accountable. For the first 10 years of my incarceration, I continued to blame my victim, Shay, for making me murder him. As crazy as that sounds, that was the feeling that was in me, this seething anger. If he hadn't done what he did, if we didn't get in an argument, if he hadn't pushed me around, I wouldn't have had to do what I had to do. And that's the story that I was telling myself. And that was validated by a lot of the people around me. When I said I was indoctrinated in this hateful world in prison, you know, I adopted the ideologies, I wore the symbols of them. I did everything I could do to prove I was one of them. I got Nazi tattoos tattooed on me while I was in prison to show my loyalty to something I really wanted to belong. And I've heard that, you know, discussed at this conference as well, this feeling of needing to belong. And I felt like I belonged there with them, and that I had to really rediscover where that pain was coming from, why I was so angry, because I had to learn, you know, grip that anger is a secondary emotion. It's actually stemming from something deeper buried under that. And just like Fateen, I was very angry at my father. I had to do a lot of work to realize he grew up without a father. He didn't know how to be a father. There's no manual on how to be a father. And I had to forgive him and really start looking at my actions, what harm I caused. And really, I think through programs like GRIP, where I talk to surrogate victims like Trino that will come in and share his story, and I could connect with the pain that Trino had seen in, with other victims of violent crime and survivors. And I know there's a lot of survivors out here today, and I will tell you from the bottom of my heart, someone that's committed, you know, the worst act that you can commit against another human being, took another person's life. I'm sorry. I will apologize on my behalf and the behalf of people like me, even if you don't get to hear those words from the people who committed those acts against you. I think, you know, their pain and seeing victims' pain has really helped me understand the preciousness of life and how vulnerable and fragile it is, and really come to terms with the harm I've caused in my communities. And, you know, the example I set for people that come behind me, and just like Fateen, you know, I work every day to a life of service and try to make amends for that pain. I know nothing can truly repair that harm, but I work my hardest every day to that, and to be accountable. I'm probably, my wife tells me, you know, you take accountability way too much for everything, because I think, you know, every action I do, and I think about that, like, who's this gonna affect down the road, what I do and what I say, and how I show up in the world.
Thank you. So you've talked about the alienation and the isolation and the sense of being given messages of not being worthy or not being good enough as young people, as children, and then the journey that you went through to become accountable and to heal that part of you. And I'm curious, Fateen, if you could talk a little bit about now as a facilitator in the circle, how do you work with others to help them shift out to recognize and understand where that pain is coming from, and then shift out of the mindset or the beliefs that led them to a life of violence?
Absolutely. So in the work we do as a facilitator, we do a variety of assignments, and one of the assignments, big assignments, is challenging the belief systems, right? Specifically around the male role belief system and masculinity, how that's defined, how does it look, and what are the traditions of it, and what is a more wholesome view of it, right? Without folks feeling that they're losing something, right? And so we have our students really challenge their belief systems and ask, where did they come from? How did they influence you? Is it something that you agree with, or you just roll with it, just went with the flow, and then it became part of you that you feel like you have to keep, right? And so through this process, a lot of the students realized that, you know, there was a lot of misguidance. It was a lot of, negative influences and peer pressure that led to the formation of these belief systems. That was ingrained into their character, became ingrained into their personalities and their everyday, walk of life, up until they was actually, tasked to look at them. And a lot of them realized, like, this is not who I am. I am not truly a hateful person, because, I was just helping a brother the other day with this or that. I was helping, a person that I didn't think I got along with this or that. So we had them look at the little things to show that if you are really a hateful person, or a person that, have disdain, what your behavior show. And so they have learned that a lot of their belief systems have been kind of pressed on them. And so they are changing these belief systems to become peacemakers, to what Tommy was saying, how does this decision reflects on others, how this might impact folks, right? And so that's what we want, and that's the emotional intelligence we want them to develop.
Yeah, thank you. And Tommy, you mentioned one of the teachings from GRIP around anger being a secondary emotion. I think some of what you're talking about, Fateen, also is that we have the definition of violence we use from Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, that all violence is a tragic expression of an unmet need. And so then digging into kind of helping people to really look at what is that unmet need from their childhood, and then what were the messages and beliefs that then were maybe unconsciously taken on to cope with that, right? Yeah. So I want to come back to you, Trino, and then each of you to share a little bit, because at the end of towards the end of the year-long program of GRIP, so you go through this intensive part around trauma healing and going back into your own history and childhood and developing emotional intelligence, and then becoming accountable by acknowledging the crime, the commitment offense, owning that deeply. And then towards the end, it's a whole part of the curriculum is around understanding victim impact. And one of the big pieces of that is having survivors, what we call surrogate survivors, so they're not coming in to meet with the actual person that committed the the harm against them, but will come in to have a healing dialogue with a circle, with a tribe of GRIP students. And Trino, I know you have come in as a surrogate survivor to a number of GRIP tribes. I'm curious what your experience is and what that's like for you.
Yeah, first of all, when Restorative Justice GRIP works with the California Department of Corrections, they have an extension called the Office of Victim Services, and in this partnership, there creates an opportunity to address the needs of the survivor, to address how can we help you heal, how can we help you address your needs. And coming in as a surrogate survivor, there could be some survivors where their loved one was murdered and they never apprehended somebody. So it creates a space for a survivor to come in and just really express their pain, express their emotion, whatever that may be. And for me, I've witnessed literally men move to tears as I've come in to share. I really believe in the power of transformation. The person who took my brother's life, I was able to look through transcripts and gather information about him that as a young boy, he experienced racism, he experienced mistreatment that led to isolation. As a child, he didn't have a lot of friends, and it led for him to becoming an angry person, started committing crimes, and at every point of his life, it just kept to escalate. And back in the days of the 80s, there was just the California Department of Corrections. They went into prison, they came out unchanged, and there was no offer to rehabilitate or to connect to their hearts and go deep into where they're feeling their pain or their anger and getting to the source of those things. And he came out unchanged. And 4 months later, after he came out, he took my brother's life. And for me, that's another driver to want to really get into the hearts of individuals as I share my story with them. And as I was watching the video, one of the GRIP graduates today is my boss. I get to work with him, and I see just the incredible power that these programs offer for those that really seek to move away from hate, to move away from anger, to move away from harming other people. And like Kim mentioned, that they make a commitment to be a peacemaker. And many of those individuals I've witnessed firsthand that they are truly transformed. So as a surrogate survivor, it also just carries another set of power that I never really knew was there, because when I started my journey, it was just a personal journey between me and the person responsible, and I never knew that there was just a bigger opportunities for me to take this pain and take this horrific event and use it to address issues and address others' pains from other victims that I identify with to a community of those that are in our prison as well.
Tommy, what do you remember about your experience when you were a student in the GRIP program and having surrogate survivors come into the circle?
First off, I think, as a tribe, I don't think we talked much about where the tribe numbers and all that come from, but as a group of men incarcerated in that tribe, we tally the years that each of us has spent, and they could be well over 1,000 years when you look at the tribe as a whole. But during that year of transformation for all of us, I think we do a lot of the work that Fateen talked about, being accountable and understanding the harm we've caused the community. And I think when we have a surrogate survivor like Trino come in, the impact, of that, it brings it home. I think, I can speak from my experience. I feel protective. I want to protect Trino. I feel saddened by that. I know I've made other people feel the way Trino's felt, or even, worse. And I think that, it's called restorative justice for a reason. I think it can be. It doesn't always work, but I'm sure it works more often than not. It restores something not only to the offender like myself, but to hopefully the victim. It's a space for them to be heard, truly heard by people on the other side that had done such grievous things, and hopefully someone like myself can begin to understand that. And I have a friend named Upu that often says, once you know better, you do better. And I think that's a simplification of an idea, like once you feel that pain and you feel that harm that you caused, I know I can't go back to being that perpetrator, and I can't stand by and watch it happen in front of me. And I think the impact people like Trino's had on me is that I've given my life over to trying to make sure other young adults, youth, don't travel down the same path and make the same bad decisions that I made as a young adult.
And what are you doing now as a professional?
I work for a state department in the state of California. My official title is a transition navigator. I work for the California Conservation Corps, and we train 18 to 25-year-olds. And I help them transition into life, into their careers. I talk to them about, I help them with their resumes, I help them with cover letters, but I also talk to them about life in general and the impact their decisions are going to have, not only on their life, but the people around them every day. And I get a lot of value out of that.
Mm-hmm. And knowing what you know and what you've gone through in your own life, what do you feel works best to prevent young people that you're working with now to go down the path that you did?
That's a hard question. I've been struggling with that, listening to the conference, listening to other speakers, thinking of this idea. I don't think there's one solution, but if I can offer one solution, I would say generally a person that cares about the young adult, and that young adult can see that, has a very positive influence in their lives.
And Fateen, maybe to pick up on that in terms of, again, as a facilitator, when you think about your journey and just why we do the work in a circle, in a group, and call it a tribe, what that sense of, why that's important, what that sense of connection or belonging does.
Yeah. So yeah, the work is done entirely in a circle. Every session, we have two different models. We have a weekly model and a monthly model, which is 8 hours monthly, 2 hours weekly in various institutions. And in these circles, the way that is designed is to represent community and to show that, kind of like King Arthur's Round Table, a circle of folks having a shared experience. And what we do a few things that are very important as far as naming the tribe. I think Tommy alluded to it a little bit. We add up everybody's years that has been served throughout their life, and we come up with a number. My original tribe was 928. We done had numbers up to 1,035 before of total time served. And it'd be compared to the amount of decision time made in making a decision to commit a crime. And generally, that time is about 5 minutes max. So between 5 minutes of decision-making time, and we also unfortunately have lives lost within those 5 minutes, people who passed away, people who've been hurt, a total of 920 years served of lost lifetime, freedom time from those decisions with the damage in between. And so we do that to show the significance of decision making, how the ripple effect of one bad decision can damage a whole community. And we end up helping them understand, like, we were damaged too at one point. Somebody made a bad decision that affected us. And we want to stop ourselves from making these bad decisions that has affected others. So the tribe is really important. Everybody has a voice. No one is better than anyone. We don't come in as outside facilitators as if we have power over them. We are more so about power with. We're not power over. Everybody's voice matter. And we make sure that they are held in high value, that they are treated like human beings. And that in and of itself, I think, helps nurture the space for transformation.
So we're almost at the hour, so I want to thank the three of you, and I'm just so grateful to get to work with all of you, and it's one of the things that gives me hope in a pretty dire state of the world. I think it's really important that we find these kinds of people and programs that are offering hope and transformation. And just in California, there are 35,000 lifers incarcerated at the cost of $110,000 a year per person. And it costs us $3,500 per person to have somebody like Tommy or Fateen go through the program. So we think that there's just extraordinary benefit at the human level and at the financial level, at the societal level, to be investing in programs that can transform harm, that can make people accountable and come home to be peacemakers, and that really it's a movement with survivors, with outside community members, with incarcerated people to really come up with an alternative. So we're working to expand our program and to actually create hubs in core prisons in the state that we could then identify lifers when they're first sentenced. Our vision, our idea is start early, right when somebody is incarcerated, and give them the choice. You can go and spend 10, 15, 20 years at a maximum security level prison, engaging in the race-based prison politics, continuing on a path of violence for many years, or you can make a commitment and a choice to come to a GRIP hub prison and get on a path of healing right away with wraparound support from folks like Fateen and inside GRIP graduates who are creating a culture change on the yards of prisons and turning prisons into a place for rehabilitation and healing. And although we don't think that no one should have to go to prison in order to get access to healing and support, that at least once if they do go to prison, that's what prison should be about. It shouldn't be about more punishment. It should be about how to get you back on track, healed and accountable to come home and be contributing members of society. So hopefully there's other folks in the room here and in the conference that are really looking at how do we create the supportive and healing communities outside of prisons that can prevent crime and hate violence from happening. So thank you, and we're happy to be here.
Yeah.